Hi friends, hope you are fine. In this video, let us understand one of the most amazing cells of all, the neuron or the nerve cell. As you see, the structure is completely different from other cell types that makes it special and also makes us special too. In this video, we'll be discussing the structure of neuron or what is synapse and how neuron communicates, a simplified explanation. Let's begin with the anatomy or structure of neuron. Let's begin with cell body. Cell body is also called as soma. It is with nucleus and all other organelles. It controls all functions of the cell. Let us zoom in the cell body. As you see, there are all organelles like mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum, then nucleus, and synthesizes all proteins that is required for the normal functioning of the cell. Then the second structure is called the dendrites. So dendrites are fine branches that receives and processes incoming signals from other neurons. As you see, these are fine branches. Then the diameter varies throughout. Incoming signals may be either excitatory, that means they tend to make the neurons to fire or generate electrical impulse from the cell body, or maybe inhibitory, that means that keeps the neuron silent or prevents from generating electrical impulse. The next structure is called the axon. Axon transmits information away from the cell bodies. This is a cell body and it arises from the axon hillock. So this is the axon hillock. Axon is different from dendrites. As you see, axon, the diameter is almost uniform throughout and it is an elongated structure, where dendrites, there are fine branches and the diameter varies throughout and often short compared to axon. The next structure is called the axon hillock. Axon hillock is a pyramidal shaped region that connects this axon to the cell body. Electrical impulses are generated in the cell body, and this axon hillock is the primary integrative zone of neurons and generation of action potential, and then it moves to the axon. The next structure is called the myelin sheath. Myelin sheath, as you see, it is made up of fats and proteins. It's a protective insulation that covers the axon, that protects the axon and also helps in rapid electrical impulse transmission. So let us zoom in this myelin sheath. As you see, it consists of concentric layers of lipids, including cholesterol, and variable amounts of cerebrosides and phospholipids. It is separated by thin layers of proteins, and this arrangement gives high resistance and effective insulation. The next structure is the node of Ranvier. The node of Ranvier is the periodic gaps along the myelin sheath that covers the axon. It helps in rapid electrical impulse transmission. Here you can see myelin sheath is absent, and that region is known as node of Ranvier. Node of Ranvier interrupts the insulation at intervals, and this discontinuity actually helps impulses to jump from one node to another in a process known as saltatory conduction, thus speed up the electrical impulse transmission. The next structure is the axon terminal. Axon terminals, as you see, this axon splits into fine branches and develops bulbous swellings. This terminal is the site where neurotransmitters are released from the vesicles. And finally, the synapse. The synapse is a neuronal junction or the communication junction between neuron. It is a site of transmission of electrical nerve impulses between nerve cells or with neurons and another cell. So we'll be discussing in detail how this synapse works and how these neuron cells communicate. So this is about the structure of a neuron. Now let us see how this communication happens between neurons and other cells. So we are going to discuss a simplified version of how neurons communicate. Take this case. So this is the neuron 1. So this is the neuron 2. Neuron 1 is called the presynaptic neuron, or it is a sender neuron that sends information, and this is a postsynaptic neuron that receives information. Hope this much is clear. Now let us zoom in this synapse. So this is the synapse. So this is a presynaptic neuron and this is a postsynaptic neuron. So this is the axon terminal with many vesicles that contains neurotransmitters. Then as you see, the gap that is between this neuron is called a synaptic cleft or synaptic gap. So most synapses are chemical. Synapses communicate using chemical messengers. Sometimes there can be electrical synapses also. Now let us understand how this communication happens. Step 1. Action potential arrives at axon terminal. So actually these neurons do not physically touch at the synapse. As you see, there is a gap. An electrical signal created by the movement of ions is generated within the soma or cell body of neuron and is sent down along the axon until it reaches this presynaptic neuron axon terminal. And this electrical signal is called as the action potential. So action potential reaches the axon terminal, and this triggers voltage-gated calcium ion channels to open, and calcium enters into the axon terminal. As you see, calcium enters into the axon terminal. This calcium entry causes neurotransmitter containing vesicles to release neurotransmitters into the synaptic cleft or synaptic gap by exocytosis. As you see, this vesicle bind to the end and releases the content into the synaptic gap. Often these neurotransmitters diffuses across the synaptic cleft and binds to ligand-gated ion channels that is located on the postsynaptic membrane. And this ligand-gated channel opens, allowing the movements of charged particles across the membrane into the postsynaptic neuron, and this creates an electrical change in the cell body or soma of the postsynaptic neuron. That is called as the action potential, and the process repeats again. So this is how the neurons communicate. So let me summarize. Neurons communicate with one another in a region called as a synapse. There are presynaptic neuron and postsynaptic neuron. Presynaptic neuron is the sender and postsynaptic neuron is the receiver. Neurons do not physically touch, rather it is separated by a synaptic gap. An electrical signal that is generated by the movement of ions or charged particle is generated within the soma or cell body of presynaptic neuron, and that is sent down the axon. It reaches the axon terminal, and this action potential causes the voltage-gated calcium ion channels to open. This causes the entry of calcium into the presynaptic neuron that induces the release of neurotransmitters from the vesicles that is located at the axon terminal. This chemical diffuses through the synaptic cleft and binds to the ligand-gated ion channels on the postsynaptic membrane, allowing the movement of charged particles across the membrane of postsynaptic neuron. Then this creates electrical change in the postsynaptic neuron and thus generates an action potential, and the process repeats. And this is how the neurons communicate with each other. Hope you understand the concept. Leaving you with a video on neurons based on function. You can refer that for more. Take care, stay blessed. Thank you so much for your support. You are with biologyexams4u.com.